I do want to talk now about Biden has gone forward with nominating Ketanji Brown Jackson as his Supreme Court nominee to replace Stephen Breyer. And guys, you guys know, I 99% of the time I'm talking about Biden, I'm slamming him. This was the better pick of the names that were floated. Okay, I'm certainly not saying that she is going to be fantastic. I'm not saying she's, I'm expecting her to be the kind of justice that me and most of my audience would like to put on the court. But compared to some of the others, she is actually, like, she was a public defender, and she's sided with labor on a number of cases. And some of the other names that were floated were quite the opposite. So there is a little something to celebrate here for the left, in the sense that we got a much better nominee than we otherwise might have. This is, again, the Daily Poster. And guys, I just want to plug them. If you're not subscribed to the Daily Poster, David Sirota's outlet, he's got all sorts of fantastic journalists there. Walker Bregman wrote this piece, but all sorts of fantastic journalists there. They do excellent work. They're soon to change their name to The Lever. Really encourage you to go subscribe to their work if you're not already. You love to see it. Biden's court pick just boosted unions. New Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson recently sided with public sector labor efforts. Good things are happening. Sure, between the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the accelerating climate crisis, and now the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the world is on edge. But we at the Daily Poster have compiled several positive recent stories to suggest that hope is not lost. First, President Joe Biden passed over potential Supreme Court Justice frontrunner Judge Michelle Childs, who we're going to get into here in a moment. She's one of them that I'm referencing. A union buster propped up by Lindsey Graham, and instead nominated Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, a former public defender whose recent court history suggests she could be a bit more welcoming to labor efforts. On top of that, despite the risks, dissident voices in Russia are speaking out against Russian President Vladimir Putin's Ukraine invasion. Finally, a California union just scored a major win for ice cream cake makers. Victory has never tasted so sweet. All that and much more in this week's edition of You Love to See It. So again, that part's exclusively for paid subscribers. I really just wanted the first paragraph of this to show you guys that she had nominated, that Biden had nominated Jackson as his, to replace Stephen Breyer. And again, the other names that were floated, Michelle Childs caught a lot of momentum because she was endorsed both by Jim Clyburn, who has a lot of influence over the mainstream Democratic Party. Obviously, the role he played in 2020 in making Biden the nominee. He has a lot of he holds a lot of weight in the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, Jim Clyburn long ago was a civil rights hero and has unfortunately turned into one of the most corrupt conservative Democrats in all of Congress. He takes more big pharma money than anybody else in the House. And legislates accordingly, I guess you could say. But we're going to get into a couple of things here about Michelle Childs. I still did want to cover this, even though she wasn't nominated, because I do think it's still relevant that these kinds of forces will act, right? When there's a power vacuum, like a Supreme Court justice stepping down, you will have the Clyburns and Lindsey Grahams of the world come out and endorse the Michelle Childs of the world. So I do think it's still worth covering and taking you guys through a little bit of her record. This is ABC. Labor issues complicate Judge J. Michelle Childs' Supreme Court candidacy. Liberal groups warn it would actively organize against Childs if she's picked. The very career experience that makes Supreme Court candidate Judge J. Michelle Childs attractive to both the Democrats and Republicans may now be complicating her potential nomination, as some labor and progressive groups warn that the White House that her appointment would break President Joe Biden's promise to be the most pro-union president in history. Childs, backed by influential South Carolina Representative James Clyburn and the only candidate named by the White House as in the running to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. This piece was written before he nominated Jackson. Spent 8 years practicing labor and employment law at a prestigious South Carolina firm, Nexen Pruitt. To be clear, when they say labor, they mean on the side of management. Nexen Pruitt is a South Carolina-based law firm that engages in union busting and represents giant firms against their workers. Okay. Some of her clients included employers accused of race and gender discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace. And guys, I just want to take a moment here to note how absurd the identity politics in this instance are. Biden had promised that he would put a black woman on the court. Long overdue. In a vacuum, absolutely long overdue. We've not had a black woman as a Supreme Court justice. But guys. So the name that Clyburn comes up with, the guy who lets his entire reputation rely upon people viewing him as a civil rights hero and fighting for the black community. This guy picks a woman who defended employers against racial discrimination suits. Do you see how run amok the identity politics has gotten in this party? It's to the point now where you can appoint a black person who has spent their career screwing over the black community, and you can call it progress. And people fall for it, right? It's the same card Clyburn plays whenever he's called out for his corruption or for his conservatism is, oh no, look what I did 50 years ago, right? So you guys, we gotta see past that surface level identity politics. I would love a black woman on the court. Jackson will be the first black woman on the Supreme Court. She at least was not fucking representing employers against employees who were filing racial and sexual discrimination suits, right? At least the identity stuff doesn't completely conflict with itself in the case of Jackson. It clearly did in the case of Childs. Quote, her record shows that she wins for employers, and I think that's problematic in this moment, said Joseph Givargis, executive director of Our Revolution, billed as the nation's largest grassroots-funded progressive group allied with Bernie Sanders. Quote, if we have any doubt about where the nominee stands on labor rights or the power of corporations versus labor in our economy right now, we should not put them forward, and we would actively oppose them. Okay? So that's the first thing with Childs that was of deep concern, is that she came up union busting and representing big firms against their workers. There's also a second one, though. And this there's an added sort of layer of disgust to this, but we'll get into the details to start. This is in the American Prospect. It's by Alexander Salmon. Michelle Childs sentenced a man to 12 years for selling 8 ounces of weed. Quote, I had more time than people in there who killed somebody, said Willie Roy Goodwin, who received the harsh sentence from the Supreme Court hopeful. In 2009, Willie Roy Goodman went before Richland County Circuit Court Judge J. Michelle Childs to plead guilty. He didn't really have much of a choice after inviting an undercover cop into his house repeatedly and selling him marijuana, all caught on hidden camera. He thought a plea deal looked like his best bet. So plead he did to 5 charges of possession with intent to distribute marijuana and 1 charge of failure to stop for a law enforcement vehicle. He was prepared for more than a slap on the wrist. Even though he was a non-violent offender, it was his 3rd marijuana arrest, which in South Carolina brought with it a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years. 5 years minimum for a marijuana arrest, you guys, for fucking Christ's sake. The length wasn't the only concern. By the letter of South Carolina law, Goodwin would have to be housed with mainly violent offenders because third strike weed distribution charges were not eligible for parole at the time. But there was also reason to be hopeful. The sum total of all 5 weed sales was only 8.73 ounces, a trifling amount to justify putting someone away for half a decade. It was this really, you guys, that's such a that's not even a point. I don't care if he sold fucking 80 pounds. It's weed. God damn. It's not worth any time in jail, no matter how much it was. I get what they're pointing out, that it's particularly egregious with such a small amount. But come on, guys. Is that really different? There shouldn't be a standard of amount. Where was I here? It was the sort of situation where a canny judge, understanding the situation, could have found some sort of workaround. Quote, 5 years was what they were saying in the beginning. I'm thinking it ain't nothing but some weed, Goodwin told me via phone. Even my lawyer was telling everybody weed was about to be legalized. It wasn't anything serious. So they go on to talk about how he was serving 12 years with murderers, and he said that a lot of the murderers were in there on lesser sentences than his sentence for a marijuana charge. Fucking marijuana charge. By the way, what a waste of fucking police resources to send undercover agents in to bust people for selling pot. You know, so the next time police departments turn around and try to act like defunding the police is going to cut into their ability to deal with violent crime, maybe you could ask them why they divert so much of their resources to stupid shit like this. You want to stop violent crime? Take the egregious amount of money, the copious amounts of money that we're already giving you, and direct it to violent crime instead of towards this guy for selling fucking pot. So that's one point. The second point, and I mentioned an added layer of disgust as it pertains to Michelle Childs here. She very clearly threw the book at Willie specifically because she was being considered for an appointment to the federal judiciary, an appointment with which Barack Obama then gave her almost immediately after she sentenced this guy to 12 years for pot. So her incentive was not actually to do right by the defendant or to follow the letter of the law, right? Or engage in the nonsense formalism that we like to think our justice system operates on. Nothing of the sort. Her incentive was pretty clearly to throw the book at this dude to prove that she's a law and order, tough on crime type of judge, so that Obama would appoint her, and appoint her he did. So that's how you get on the federal court in the United States. You engage in stuff that the community would despise and find to be barbaric, but you do so because the perception is then that you're tough on crime, and even the Democratic Party will then reward you for such findings. So just a whole bunch of layers of disgust to Michelle Child's career and her decision in this particular case. And one more thing, this is about exactly what we were just reading about. It's just a comparison here by Alec Karakatsanis. Really encourage you guys, add a quality Alec if you're not following him. He's an attorney who points out how the media, plays stenographer for police departments and misrepresents crime and uses hyperbole to scare civilians into supporting police and this kind of thing. Tweets, "It takes enormous cruelty to put a human being in a cage for 12 years for possessing the marijuana plant. We live in a society in which people capable of such an act of cruelty are discussed as good people for important jobs. Indeed, they are the only people discussed." And he's sharing a tweet here from Daniel Boguslaw, who says, "The man on the left got that's Willie. The man on the left got 12 years for 8 ounces of weed. The man on the right paid a fine for 30 federal crimes. They shared the same judge, Michelle Childs." Now take a look at those people and tell me you don't know exactly why Willie had the book thrown at him, and this asshole on the right gets to get away with 30 federal violations. That is the justice system in a snapshot, is what that is. And the fact that even today, the Democrats were considering rewarding Michelle Childs for this conduct with a Supreme Court nomination should tell you a whole heck of a lot about Joe Biden and the Democrats. And Jim Clyburn, who, it's also worth noting, Michelle Childs happens to be from South Carolina. You think Jim Clyburn is really just putting forth who he thinks is the best nominee? Come on. He's playing inside politics like he's done for decades. And it's just nauseating. And with Clyburn, I find it particularly nauseating because he hides behind his past and he hides behind the identity politics. And I just think that's even worse because you're also minimizing what continues to be a serious problem. We absolutely have miles to go in terms of creating a society that is just for the Black community and the Native community, Hispanic community, etc. But we have miles and miles to go. For Jim Clyburn to hide behind that while he actively opposes such progress is just like repulsive. It is unscrupulous. It is like I don't have enough adjectives in my head to describe how strongly I would like to condemn that kind of conduct from those like Jim Clyburn. So I'm very grateful that we got the seeming more progressive, potential nominee here as compared to some of the others, especially Michelle Childs. I do want to be clear, though. I'm certainly not trying to overstate the extent to which Ketanji Brown. I'm sorry. Is it Jesus Christ? Yeah, Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'll have to get used to the new name on the court. Ketanji Brown Jackson. I don't mean to oversell the extent to which she might actually be progressive, but the fact that she was a public defender and the fact that she has found on the side of labor in a number of her cases is at least a sign that she's, not going to be as bad as Stephen Breyer and not going to be as bad as Michelle Childs would have been. So we'll obviously there's more to this. She has to be confirmed. And who knows if the mansions and cinemas and testers and coons of the world are going to be inclined to confirm her. We'll follow that fight as it goes. I very much doubt any Republican is going to be inclined to confirm her. It's also worth, says a lot about Michelle Childs that Lindsey Graham was willing to endorse Michelle Childs. If Lindsey Graham endorses you, something's fucking wrong. Okay. So I doubt Lindsey Graham is going to get on board with Jackson, but we'll see how this fight shapes up. We'll also see if the Democrats roll over like they have as it pertains to the Supreme Court for decades at this point, letting the Republicans just stomp all over them whenever they want to either stop a Democrat appointment or force their own through. The Republicans have always succeeded in this because the Democrats just roll over and play dead as their version of hardball politics. So we'll see how all this goes, and we'll keep covering that as it develops. But I am grateful that at least, the lesser of the bad, I suppose, Jackson seems like a decent appointment as far as Supreme Court potentials go. So